Hey guys, Telegram Sam here. If you don't already know, I have an Instagram. It's Telegram _ Sam _ vinyl. So if you're on Instagram, check me out on there. But today I, of course, had to wear my Foo Fighters shirt in honor of the late, great Taylor Hawkins. Yeah, this one sucks. This one really sucks. Probably one of the greatest concerts I've ever been to was the concert I got the shirt from, the Sonic Highways tour, even though it was the tour where Dave Grohl had a broken leg and he was in his like Game of Thrones style guitar chair. They still put on a fucking killer show. Of course, Taylor Hawkins got out from behind the drum kit and sang a few songs, and he just was one of the greatest modern drummers of our time, and it just fucking sucks. It sucks, and it sucks. It's like hard to think of the Foo Fighters without Taylor, so I'm kind of interested to see what Dave would do now that Taylor isn't in the band. I know Taylor probably would want them to go on, but I don't know. It'll just be weird if they do and not just having Taylor there, you know. But yeah, just such a great loss. I feel like this year in general, like every week, it's just another artist dies, another artist dies, and even though you're thankful for the music, you know, we got from them while they were here, it's just sad to think like, oh, there won't be anything new. It's like, I wonder what things they were working on. Like, I don't know, it just sucks. It always fucking sucks as a music lover and a nerd to know you'll never get to hear anything new from them. But yeah, the show must go on, and yeah, just we'll miss you, Taylor. Anyways, for the main part of this video, I'm an avid reader. I've loved reading since I was a kid. When I am listening to music, I'm most of the time reading, and my favorite genre of books is nonfiction music books. So I thought I would come up with 5 books and 5 albums to read with those books as like companions. So yeah, let's get into those 5 books and their companion records. So the first book I want to show is Revenge of the She-Punks, A Feminist Music History from Polystyrene to Pussy Riot by Vivian Goldman. Vivian Goldman herself is a great punk singer, but now she mainly writes books, and I think she also teaches like music theory. Yeah, she's a professor teaching punk, Afrobeat, and reggae at New York University. But yeah, just such a great in-depth look at women in punk music and their influence on punk music, and every chapter has like a great lineup and track listing of like music and bands to listen to. So you have, you know, Blondie, Polystyrene, X-Ray Specs, The Raincoats, Bikini Kill, Bush Tetras, and I think there was one where they talk about like Slayer Kinney, the later 90s stuff, Crass, Chrissy Hine, Alice Bag of the Bags. I mean, just like everything you want to know about just, yeah, female empowerment, and especially female empowerment in punk music. This is the go-to book. And as a companion piece to this, I chose something she talks about quite a lot in this book, the 90s Riot Grrrl movement, which was kicked off pretty much by this 45. This is Bikini Kill's new radio / Rebel Girl, and Rebel Girl kind of became the, you know, anthem of the whole Riot Grrrl movement that came out of Olympia, Washington during the early 90s. And this is just such a badass punk Riot Grrrl. Just everything you need to know about the Riot Grrrl movement is on this, and yeah, just killer. And thank you to Vic who sent this to me. I've always been on the lookout for this and have never seen one in person, and this was just such a killer gift from him, so thank you. Next up, we got taking a bit of a left turn here. We got White Line Fever, the autobiography by Lemmy Kilmister with Janice Garza. Yeah, I am a huge Motorhead fan. I love Lemmy. He's just so cool. He's sort of the personification of like a rock star, you know, the sex, drugs, rock and roll. He really lived that life pretty much straight up to the end of his life. And yeah, this is just such a fun, like, easy read. He really just has such a great sense of humor, and you really get that from this book. And you can just, like, all of his weird little euphemisms and weird little sayings he would say are in here. And of course, he goes into, like, his early childhood. His father leaving when he was quite young. He never even met his father, I believe. Growing up in poverty in Britain, living with his grandmother and his mother, and then ending up, joining the bands like Sam Gopal, and then, his time with Hawkwind, and then later on forming Motorhead, and even when he would cop drugs for, like, Jimi Hendrix when he was a roadie for him a little bit. Like, it's just such a great book, and it's really not that long. It's a little over 200 pages. But yeah, just a really fun read if you don't want something super, super serious and in-depth about him or his career, but, you still get the fun little highlights of it. And of course, I had to show this album, probably the most well-known, well-regarded of Motorhead's albums, Ace of Spades. This is a great 40th anniversary edition of it that comes in, like, this hardback book, and it has a 45 RPM, like, remaster of the album Ace of Spades, and then it also came with, like a little book on the inside talking about, the history of Motorhead and this album, and going into how it was made in each of the songs. It has the lyrics for the songs, and then it also has a 2 live record, live in Belfast 1981. That sounds freaking killer. That's kind of also what Motorhead was known for, is just playing these ear-busting live shows, just cranked to 11. So yeah, this is just such a great companion piece to that book. And then next up, probably one of my all-time favorite music biography memoirs. This is a memoir of a runaway neon angel by Cherie Currie with Tony O'Neill. God, this is such a fantastic book. I mean, Cherie Currie, singer of the Runaways, and she had a bit of a solo career afterwards. But yeah, I remember I watched the movie The Runaways, which is loosely based off of this book, thinking it was gonna kind of be that, but, like, literally only 0.01% of that movie is what's in this book. Man, she went through some shit, especially since, she was in a band for 2 years, and by the time she left that band, she was still a teenager. I think she was 17 or 18 when she left the Runaways. And just to experience so much life when you're still a kid and, like, touring the world and being this, sexualized female singer, it's just so crazy. And, she goes into her addiction problems, her tumultuous marriage, and, she really goes from, like, childhood to pretty much her life, at least in the mid-2000s, I think, before she put out this book, of just sort of living in the California woods, just, being a chainsaw wood artist. And yeah, it's just such a great book, and some parts are just hard to read just because of some of the crazy shit she had to go through, that was just so unfortunate. And yeah, I don't know how she survived, honestly. I could not imagine going through what she went through at such a young age and coming out a somewhat normal adult. But yeah, this is just such a great book, and if you haven't read it, just really read it. It's so important, and just such a great story of just amazing, badass female singer. And yeah, and there's a foreword by Joan Jett too, so that's pretty dope. But for the companion record for that book, I could have gone with, a Runaways album. That's a pretty easy choice. But I decided to go with her first solo album, Beauty's Only Skin Deep. Yeah, it's definitely a sharp left turn from what she was doing with the Runaways. This is definitely more of a pop-centric album. There's sort of like some undertones of rock, glam rock in some songs, but it's mainly pop songs and ballads. Definitely don't prefer this over the Runaway stuff, but you can tell she was just really trying to distance herself from the Runaways. She was like really hurt, having to leave that band since she loved it in the beginning, but of course things just got so crazy with like Kim Fowley, and just they were jealous of Cherie Currie because she was seen as like the singer and like the poster child, and like all the pictures and interviews about the band were mainly just of her and not like the other girls in the band. So yeah, just not the greatest album, but it's just a cool thing to have. And as like a big Runaways fan and a big Cherie Currie fan, I'm just really happy to have this. So yeah. Next up, we got a very, very dense biography, or not autobiography, but biography. This is Shaky, Neil Young's biography by Jimmy McDonough. This is a very, very dense book, very thin pages with fine print. It's about 700 pages long. This is a very, very in-depth book about Neil Young's life and career, pretty much from his birth to the late 90s, which is when Jimmy McDonough finished writing the book. And then right before he was about to publish it, Neil Young was like, no, I don't give you permission to do this anymore. Because originally when he had Neil Young's authorization to do this book, he went to the farm where Neil Young lives in California, and like had interviews with him, and was going through his archives, and like Neil Young was like all for it. And then just like right before it was about to be published, Neil Young changed his mind, and they were essentially in a legal battle for I think about like 10 years before Jimmy McDonough finally won and was able to release this book. And I'm glad he did. I wouldn't say this is like a great book if you're like just sort of getting into Neil Young, but this is like if you're a big Neil Young fan and just want to learn more about his life and like his life during the times of like him writing certain albums. This is a very, very great, in-depth, well-written book about him. And yeah, it's just very thick, very in-depth. If you're just a major Neil Young fan and want to know more about him, this is the book. This is it. But I would say I was about a medium Neil Young fan. This was kind of like right when I started really getting into this work, and I feel like this got me more excited and wanted to get into more of some of his lesser known or less praised about albums. So yeah, this is really cool. And I didn't go with any of his solo work, actually. I actually went with some of his earlier work. This is again by Buffalo Springfield. I don't know, I just chose this because this was the beginning of his work, and the beginning of what would end up becoming Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and then what would end up going into his solo work. It would have been interesting to see where his music would have gone if he just went solo at the beginning and never was in Buffalo Springfield or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I feel like both of those bands had a great influence on his work and where he would end up going. And Mr. Soul on this album, the opening track, is just such a killer song. It's kind of like a heavy song, heavy hard rock song, considering what Buffalo Springfield was kind of known for as like, this hippie sort of country rock band. So yeah, I love this album. Probably my favorite album of Buffalo Springfield's work. So, and then last but not least, I of course had to throw in a Stooges Iggy Pop related thing. But this is Total Chaos, the story of the Stooges as told by Iggy Pop. This is a fantastic sort of big, sort of coffee book style book, but Jeff Gold pretty much conducts this interview with Iggy Pop, going through his childhood and his adolescence, the bands he was in when he was a teenager in high school, and how he was originally a drummer and then kind of ended up being a singer, and the formation of the Stooges, and just goes through all the albums, their creative process, the infighting, the drugs, the sex, the rock and roll, the usual stuff. But it has just some of these great pictures with like, this is like the den or like the attic Iggy slept in. Yeah, just so great and just so cool if you're like a Stooges fan, like that killer picture. Stooges fan, Iggy Pop fan, hard rock fan, just such a like essential thing to have. And this isn't that expensive of a book. And at the end, it has some like interviews with Joan Jett and Dave Grohl and Josh Homme about like the Stooges and the influence that the Stooges have had on their music. And Iggy also goes into like the reunion they had in the late 2000s and what that was like after, not really seeing or talking with the Ashton brothers for almost 30, 40 years, and then, deciding to get together and try and, make another album again. So, yeah, just such a great book if you're just a crazy Stooges fan like me, or just want to get into them and just kind of know more about their story and the background of their music and, the godfather of punk, Iggy Pop. So, yeah, love this. And for this companion piece, I chose Funhouse by the Stooges because it's such a interesting record from their discography. This is sort of their middle record. This was the album they did after their self-titled debut, which is kind of like a Doors-style psych album. And then, but this was before they did Raw Power, which is considered like the first punk rock album. This is just an interesting album. It took me a while to get into the Stooges album because the first side is a very, hard rock, just killer album. But then the second side sort of morphs into this crazy jazz, free art rock, just crazy sax solo with this crazy drumming and guitars, and it's a lot. It's a lot. It definitely took me a while to get into. I know a lot of people consider this their greatest work because of that, because it was so against what rock music, especially hard rock music, was at that time, and just very stylistically important in art rock. And I agree with that. But yeah, again, it's just such an interesting record, and every time I listen to it, I'm just like, wow, this is just so ahead of its time. Even though I still don't get it quite yet, I think I'm getting there. So yeah, just killer album, essential for any record collector or music collector. So yeah, those are some 5 great music books and some records to go with them. I definitely have a lot more books, so if you like this and want me to talk about more great music books and albums to go with them, let me know, and there can be like a part 2 or 3 or 4, how many you guys really want. And yeah, suggest some great books to me down below. I'm always constantly reading, constantly looking for stuff to read, so let me know if there's any other great books that I should read. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.